We're going to mention Russell Wilson in the Hall of Fame case, or maybe lack thereof, that he potentially has. Andrew, I'll give you this first question to kick it off. Is Russell Wilson a Hall of Famer?
In my opinion, Russell Wilson is not a Hall of Famer, unfortunately. Growing up, you look at Russell Wilson, he was one of the most consistent quarterbacks, and he was also one of the quarterbacks that was always just in the mix for playoff races, especially with that defense. But I think that, especially in his earlier career, he was very reliant on that defense, and it was the reason that they won that Super Bowl and got back to a second one. After that, they were consistently in the playoff race, due in large part to his play. But I don't know. He's one of those quarterbacks that was consistently in the top 5 to top 10 quarterback conversation, but was never an elite standout quarterback. You never thought Russell Wilson was the best quarterback in the league, and he's not won any significant awards like that are just completely on him, like an MVP or anything like that, and hasn't had any significant all pro standout seasons where you'd really consider putting him in there because of any of those statistical achievements. Obviously, he's won a Super Bowl, like I mentioned earlier, and he has been one of the best quarterbacks in the league for an extended period of time. But I think the Hall of Fame is reserved for those guys that were the elite of the elite, and unfortunately, Russell Wilson just misses that cutoff, in my opinion.
Yeah, I definitely think that he's got to be in the Hall of Very good, and he's a player that hopefully what he was able to do for the Seahawks doesn't get lost in all of this. I've seen a lot of former players kind of put their opinion out there on him. I know Richard Sherman said that look at his record without the Legion of Boom, but I just feel like he was very much the cornerstone of that franchise post Legion of Boom era, if you will, like when it was kind of fading a little bit. And then I know Tony Gonzalez said that if there was any player that play themselves out of the Hall of Fame, it would be him. I don't think that is a fair thing to ever say. I think once you're in it, nothing can change that potentially. Like even if you had a couple seasons of 20 plus interceptions or something like that, and you just really destroyed in a sense your legacy, I still think you'd be a Hall of Fame quarterback. So I don't really buy those, but I just think career stats wise, peak wise, it's not really there. You got a lot of other guys with MVPs maybe to their name or 2 Super Bowls to their name that are waiting their turn right now, and I don't think he's going to get in above them.
Yeah, I will say, to Russell Wilson's credit, he was one of the most healthy quarterbacks that we've ever seen. I think the stat is that he went his first 9 or 10 seasons without missing a game. He consistently played all 16 games during the regular season, and it was just, in that respect, one of the best quarterbacks. And in general, he had one of the prettiest deep balls that you've ever seen. He was always very accurate as a quarterback. But when it comes down to it, those top level quarterbacks that are probably going to be in it, for this generation, it's probably Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, and Lamar Jackson. And then from then on, you start looking a little bit deeper. But for that generation, he kind of made it into the end of that Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, Drew Brees era. And I think that he was always on the back end of that echelon and never towards, you never thought of, or it depended on the season, but even when he was playing at his best, he was never above those guys. And I think that is the cutoff, especially even when it comes to Eli Manning, and he was on the back end of his career when Russell Wilson really started taking off. But I'm not going to say Russell Wilson was never better than Eli Manning, but holistically as a career, if Eli Manning didn't have 2 Super Bowls, and Russell Wilson didn't have a Super Bowl, if they both had no Super Bowls, I think I'm taking Eli Manning's career and or just Eli Manning as a quarterback. That's just my personal opinion. And if neither of them had Super Bowls, I think there's questions for either of them getting in. So that was a just off the top of my head comparison, but I know the comparison was made a lot when Eli Manning retired Russell Wilson's getting close, about him making the Hall of Fame and where would he be if he didn't have any Super Bowls. I think that Eli Manning is the better overall quarterback, and I think that Russell Wilson just falls into that category, is the point I'm trying to make, of quarterbacks that are just on the cusp of it, but are in more of the Hall of Very Good conversation, like you mentioned earlier.
Well, I'm glad that you at least brought up Eli Manning. I was going to go that route. I'll talk about Eli Manning first, and there are some other guys that are waiting, or at least coming down the pipe, that definitely have gotten some Hall of Fame buzz or will also get in eventually. But it's just a conversation that I don't think should have ifs in it, if that makes sense. I kind of sympathize a little bit with Russell Wilson's case, where it's that one pass, if they score on that drive against the Patriots, yes, he's got 2 Super Bowls. That's an if that I can see. Does one pass prevent you from making the Hall of Fame? Is that the case that I'm willing to acknowledge potentially? But if we compare him to Eli Manning, I have a tough time getting on with that, because those Super Bowl runs were 8 games of amazing, absolute Hall of Fame play that ended against the New England Patriots, Tom Brady, Bill Belichick dynasties, one being the 18-0 Pats at the time, and then the other being in 2012. So it's like those performances spanned more than just a few games or just one pass. It was 8 games, and then also at the same time, I felt like he was very consistent. Statistically, Eli Manning's not going to, his career numbers will be very high up there, and I feel like he reaches that bar. But statistically, season to season, he definitely had some ugly ones. But also at the same time, stats kind of they look a lot different now. You know, especially when you compare some of the QBs playing today as opposed to the later 2000s.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree on that front. And the point I was trying to make about the Eli Manning thing was just that, like statistically and just like from the eye test, I feel like I always would have rathered Eli Manning at the quarterback position over Russell Wilson. And I don't know if that is a hot take, but just I feel like Russell Wilson, like especially towards the beginning of his career, didn't really like he was more of a game manager than anything else. And then that is like towards the middle of his career is when he really started to develop. And then like the just accomplishments kind of bear that out, where he only has one first team all pro, one second team all pro, has made the Pro Bowl a couple of times, but like everybody makes the Pro Bowl. So I just don't think when you look at his career holistically and then you even remember it from like start to finish, if he's especially from the very start to like the very end, like the two latter ends of his, or the former and the latter end of his career, if it's going to be wowing anybody away. And I think that's the point that a lot of people are trying to make when they're talking about playing himself out of like being in the Hall of Fame, because I think that people are saying that if he retired before he went to the Denver Broncos, there's probably a more strong conversation to be had, because he still does have that Super Bowl and he leaves his career more on a high note, because that last year in Seattle wasn't great, but like wasn't anywhere close to the drop off that was in Denver. But I still don't think that either way he's a Hall of Fame quarterback in my opinion. So I think that the case like is a little bit interesting to be made, that like his career has just gone down by the wayside since he left Seattle, but I don't see it really either way.
I don't think he's going to retire at the end of this year. I mean, maybe he will, but there is a bit of a logjam that's being built up with the quarterbacks, and I think that that's something that should be recognized. You still got Rodgers, Breeze, and Brady coming down the pipe potentially over the next handful of years. Rodgers obviously still playing, but I think this will be his last year. And then you got some fringe guys like Phillip Rivers, Eli Manning, Stafford whenever he retires. I know that I don't know if those are 3 for 3, maybe 2 out of 3, maybe 1 out of 3, depending on who you ask. Those guys, in my opinion, would probably be ahead of Russell Wilson. I mean, I think with Stafford's performance with the Rams really kind of helped him a lot. And then statistically, Stafford's got 60,000 passing yards. And just comparing guys from the same era, Russell Wilson is at 46,000. He's almost at 47,000. So it's like that difference is taken into account. Maybe you throw a guy like Matt Ryan or Cam Newton in there. I think they're a little bit further down. Both guys MVPs in the Super Bowls, but some might even argue them over Russell Wilson too, because I just think a lot of people, when they think about the Super Bowl ring, it does go to the Legion of Boom that year that they beat the Broncos. So there's a lot of QBs that are potentially also ahead of him, and I don't see it.
I really like the Matt Stafford comparison because of the fact that I think they played for the majority in the same era of football. And then also, I think that before he left the Lions and went to the Rams, there's genuinely a conversation, like, or there still is a conversation, but like the conversation was very like passionate on both ends of should Matthew Stafford get into the Hall of Fame just based off career numbers and him having so many passing yards and him having so many or having decent seasons, with at least statistical seasons with the Detroit Lions, who were like the laughing stock of the NFL at that point. But I think that toward the back of half of his career, he maybe hasn't improved his quarterback play, but he's done enough to get the Rams a Super Bowl, and in general has it like improved his like career stats towards the end of the career, to the end of his career, while Russell Wilson, it feels like, is doing the exact opposite towards the end of his. So I think that case is like definitely like comparable, and I think that Matthew Stafford is like definitely like maybe before he went to the Rams and before Russell Wilson went to the Broncos, that was probably flipped. But now I think Matthew Stafford definitely has the edge over Russell Wilson in terms of getting into the Hall of Fame.
Okay, one quick point before we get into Jackson Dart starting. I know we've taken a little bit too much on this topic, but I always thought that when I was a big fan of Russell Wilson going to the Steelers. I know it sounds crazy with how that Broncos era kind of ended, but I thought that he could potentially have had that Kurt Warner type of resurgence where he was not a bona fide Hall of Famer when he got to the Cardinals. He had that bad stint with the Giants. They were, in the midst of kind of a transition period or whatever. And I just thought what he did with the Rams potentially, and I know a lot of people felt like this wasn't enough just holistically for a career. He had the peak, but wasn't enough for the career. And then he had a couple of really nice years to end with the Cardinals. They went to the Super Bowl, almost won it. So that I thought was potentially the route that Russell Wilson was going to take to the Hall of Fame, but that definitely seems to have closed now. Then he's getting replaced here this upcoming week.